Quinn, a member of the California Arts Council and Beverly Hills Arts Commission, is the former West Coast editor of Andy Warhol's Interview magazine and society editor of the Herald Examiner. Her cover stories can be read in Venice and Detour magazines, and she is a contributing editor to California Apparel News. For the next half hour, Joan will bring you inside news and views on society, art, film, and the exhilarating worlds of these multifaceted people. Here is Joan Quinn.
Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome to Joan Quinn, Etc. Our guest is Iris Rainer Dart. Iris Dart has done Hollywood. She's acted on stage and in film. She's written television series and TV specials. And in Hollywood, she was married to a rock concert promoter who was murdered by a robber. She's written books to help ease the pain. And now, with her younger, conservative husband, Stephen Dart, is raising her family in Pebble Beach. She may be living away from Hollywood, but with her keen memory and her sharp wit, that means she's very funny, she's still writing about Hollywood. Her book characters are always about Tinseltown. She's here to tell us about her book, The Stork Club. I thought it was about the old Stork Club in New York, and we'd be hearing about all the gossip from that supper club. But no. Iris, what is the Stork Club?
The Stork Club is a book that certain libraries in this country are going to be afraid to buy and put on their shelves because it's about gay parents, women who are single mothers by choice, families who use the high technologies and reproductive arrangements to get their babies. In other words, it's a group of people who would have dogs loosed on them in Pat Buchanan's driveway.
Do you go into the family aspect?
Absolutely. The Stork Club says it's not who we are, it's how we are to one another. And that whatever you think a family should be is what it is. And you may remember that Barbara Bush also said that in her speech at the convention. But if you don't believe me, my husband still has a job in November.
Do you define family?
Well, Richard Bach in his book Illusion said it better than I could, and that is that the bond that links our true family is not one of blood, but of respect and joy in one another's lives. And I have so many friends and know so many people who have formed families in unique ways, and so many of them are so happy. They have respect and joy in one another's lives that I think a family is whatever you want it to be.
Exactly. You raised Gregory alone because your husband was killed when he was a very young child. And now you're raising Rachel in Pebble Beach. How does it differ?
Well, I was a single mother. I was a working mother in Hollywood. I used to work on television shows and get home very late at night and be exhausted and be in tears, and I was writing comedy at the time. And it was during that time, you remember that statistic that came out that said that a single woman over 40 had as much chance of getting married as she did meeting up with a terrorist? And my odds were worse. I'd already had a drink with the terrorist and he never called me back.
That's right.
He told the people who fixed us up that I was too tough. So that was what it was like. And I always wanted to be married. And I met a wonderful man and was very lucky, but that isn't always how it is.
You talk about Steve as being so conservative, and you live in Pebble Beach, and
That's right.
Of course he's a Christian and you're a Jew.
I'm gefilte fish out of water.
And I love it because you found your temple.
That's
and
right.
a rabbi.
That's right. Well,
tell us about that.
Well, but I'm convinced that no woman or no person should have career success or babies till after they're 40. I had my first baby at 26, and I had my second one when I was 41. I have a baby like clockwork every 15 years. So by the time I married Steve Dart, I had my identity pretty much in place. So, and I've kept it. I mean, I'm up there writing books, and
I think it was great, the stories you were telling about going through Pebble Beach and all the surrounding communities outing.
Oh, that's what I said, I'm outing the Jews, right?
But you have built up.
I have found in the Carmel Valley a wonderful synagogue and wonderful friends and a whole other life up there. You know, I talk about my days in Hollywood, which were very difficult because as a writer, you can't just sit down and write. You have to have a meeting about what you're going to write. You have to talk about it. You have to collaborate with many other people. And I didn't want to do that. So I always say I'm going to write an article about leaving Hollywood called "Who Do You Have to Fax to Get Out of Here?"
And did you have to fax someone to get out?
No, happily, by the time I got out, I was writing novels exclusively.
When we first met in 1975, you were writing for the Sonny and Cher show.
I was. And I was the only woman writer at that point on an all-male staff show. And
how big was the staff?
12 men and me.
Is that right?
Yes, and it was scary. I mean, I make jokes about it now. I say, was there any sexual harassment? Probably there was, only I was so naive. I thought that Long Dong Silver was the name of the flatware pattern I'd registered for at Tiffany's. But there was, and I wasn't as brave as Anita Hill to come out and talk about it. And I kind of made my way through that world, and I really wanted to fit in.
But how did you know how to write jokes? And how did you,
well,
you just said you take meetings, and here you were.
Well, first of all, I came from a Russian Jewish immigrant family, and we were very poor. My father was a social worker in a settlement house. And we had nothing but love in our family and a great sense of humor. And it was wonderful. We had a little tiny house that shook because we laughed so much. And so laughing and joking became a big part of who I was. And my father used to calm me down when Selma Diamond was on the Jack Parr show. And Selma, remember Selma, she talked like this. And she'd tell Jack Parr all her stories about what it was like to be a middle-aged Jewish comedy writer. And I used to say, why does my father think that's a good career for me? And of course now, as the years go on, I'm starting to sound like her, and I think I may be channeling Selma Diamond, actually.
But you went from writing jokes at Sonny and Cher
Right.
to writing Beaches, which was a very strong, sympathetic book.
Well, if the question is, do I write comedy or drama?
I mean, how did you make the transition?
Well, there really isn't a transition, because what I do is I write about the human condition. And as you know from your life and my life and the lives of all of our friends, life is alternately comic and tragic, and sometimes the same at the same time. And I think it's presumptuous to talk about having a trademark, because I've only written 5 books. So, at 25 books we'll talk about it. But if I was to say there was something that I tried to do in my books, it would be to get people to laugh and cry.
Which you did in Beaches. Tell us a little bit about the story. And Bette Midler played. The book was then made into a movie,
Right,
Beaches.
Yes, I had 3 chapters in an outline, and I took the book to Steve Dart, who was my husband, who was my boyfriend then, and he said to me, gee, this is really good. Do you know anybody who knows Bette Midler? And I said, well, I know somebody who knows Bette Midler. And he said, well, I would try and get it to her. And I did, and her people called me, and I went over to her house. And I had only seen her on the stage. I'd only seen that kind of brash body persona that she plays in her act. So I wasn't prepared for Bette Midler, who is about my size. In fact, she's an inch taller. When I walked into the room, she wanted to measure back to back and see who was taller. And she was so intelligent and so soft-spoken and so bright and so wonderful. And she said, I'm going to make this into a movie. Well, it took 9 years for the actual movie to get made, because at that time she was at a very low point in her career, and a lot of people were betting against her, and I just knew that it would happen, and I just left it in her hands, and it happened. Finally, her career took off, and then she had to deal with Paramount, and Michael Eisner went from Paramount to Disney, and they took the project with them, and finally it got made.
Gary Marshall directed that.
Gary Marshall, so wonderful. Well, Gary Marshall was a mentor of mine. He taught me how to write comedy 20 years ago, and he said,
what is it? How does he teach you how to write comedy?
We would sit in a restaurant and he'd say, you gotta pick up a salt shaker and look at it this way and look at it that way and see which is the funny way. But he was wonderful, because when he got the job of directing Beaches, he called me up. He said, so I'm back in your life again. and we had lunch, and he said to me, knowing that I didn't want to write the screenplay because I didn't want to collaborate with anybody, he said to me, by way of telling me that I made the right decision, he said, when you have a writer, a producer, a director, a studio, and a star. None of you are making the same picture. And he was telling me that it was going to be so collaborative that if I wanted to see my vision on the screen, I was being foolish because I never would. And that's why I didn't write the screenplay.
But that is why you didn't write the screenplay.
Right.
I was wondering how you felt about not writing
Well,
it.
you know, I knew, and I always know, the Stork Club has just been optioned by ABC as a miniseries, and I'm not writing that teleplay either. And I know that I stand the chance that I'm going to walk into that screening room or turn on that television and I'm going to see something that isn't mine. But it isn't mine anyway at that point. My version of the story stands in the bookstore, stands in the library, and what you see on the screen is the collaborative version of other people's visions. And that's okay too. You know, I'd rather write the books and not have to go to the meetings.
Do you think, are most of your things about true instances, situations that most of your books?
They all spring from something that I'm feeling. My cousin is my best friend, and years ago we were together, and she said to me, just one night in a conversation, she said, you know, when one of us goes, being kind of maudlin, she said, when one of us goes, I hope it's me first, because I couldn't stand to live in a world that didn't have you in it.
Oh.
And I was so moved by that, and I started thinking about what that would be like, which will in fact someday happen. One of us will bury the other, and how will we feel about it? You know, how will the remaining one feel about it? And that was what inspired Beaches, my relationship with her.
Did you write a sequel to Beaches?
I did. It's called I'll Be There. The paperback is called Beaches 2, I'll Be There.
Beaches
and it's
2.
all about Cece, the character played by Bette Midler, and how she's raising that little girl, that very conservative little girl.
Also, Boys in the Mailroom had to do with, one of your first books had to
Right.
do with Steve Wolf, your
Steve
husband.
Wolf was in the mailroom at MCA, and he was in the mailroom with Mike Medavoy and Walter Hill and Mark Norman, the writer, and
John Badham.
And John Badham, yes.
Right.
And they had a very famous mailroom group, and they all were very successful, and I thought that was worthy of writing about, so I wrote The Boys in the Mailroom.
We're going to be leaving in a very short time. Before we leave, we want to know why you left Hollywood.
Well, I left Hollywood because I didn't want to go to any more meetings, but my next book that I'm working on is about 4 women in their 40s. I say it's a cross between Hot Flashes and the Joy Luck Club, and it's called Show Business Kills.
Ah, so we better get out of Hollywood before that
you can
happens.
take the girl out of Hollywood, but you know the rest.
Well, we still have you, Iris, and we still love you.
Thanks, likewise.
Thanks for being with us, and we'll be right back after the break. Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and we're back, but we're at the Beverly Hills TV studios now because Joe Fay brought all of his work over here. Although artist Joe Fay was born in Rhode Island in 1950, he grew up in San Diego, California. After high school, he went back to Rhode Island and went to RISD, the design school there, for a year, and then finished his work at San Diego State. After meeting artists Laddie John Dill and Chuck Arnaldi, he moved to Venice to pursue his career. Joe's work has been exhibited in group shows in the United States and in Europe. He's represented by the Jan Baum Gallery in Los Angeles. And in 1987, he won the Young Talent Award from the LA County Museum of Art, and he had a one-man show there. His studio is in downtown Los Angeles. Hi, Joe.
Hi.
What influences did Laddie and Chuck have on your move to Los Angeles?
Well, when I met them, I saw that the kind of work that I was doing, and they thought that I was sort of wasting my time in Los Angeles. So, with a lot of encouragement, they told me that I should move to LA. And
I mean, that you were wasting your time in San Diego.
yeah, there wasn't really any art scene down there. So they thought that if you wanted to be an artist, that it was better to be in a bigger city. And at that point, I moved up and started working for Laddie and Chuck. And
what were they doing? What kind of work were they doing?
Chuck was doing the stick paintings then. I guess, I don't know, I hope that's correct to call them that. And then Laddie was doing the concrete and glass paintings, which she's still doing basically.
And what were they doing in San Diego, and what were you doing in San Diego?
I was working at a gallery gallery called the Cedar Creek Gallery, where it was in the Hotel Del Coronado, and it exhibited people like Bob Rauschenberg and Warhol, Billy Al Bankston, and Laddie Dill. And
were you pursuing an art career at that time?
Well, I was mostly reading books in the gallery because there really wasn't any art scene to get attached to, other than the sort of maverick group shows that one would get into every now and then around the San Diego.
But were you painting or working at
Yeah, I was painting. I had a little cottage in Coronado, and I had a little garage adjacent to the cottage, and I had my little studio set up there, and I would go out there and work and try to do work, and I was always doing something. I always liked just making stuff.
So you weren't actually painting. You weren't starting your career as a painter.
No, I was sort of kind of working, doing paintings, but I really was sort of looking at everything and trying to find out how it all happened, how one got shows, and how that happened. So that's when the move to LA was decided.
So was it a good move coming to LA?
Yeah, it was. I moved up here. My wife was pregnant, and we didn't really have a place to live. But Laddie and Chuck were really helpful. They helped me find a place in the building where they were, which was convenient for them because I got to work for them. And we made the transition pretty easily, and it was a good thing because it made me sort of take it. I decided to become real serious about making art then, I think.
You used really unconventional methods when you first started putting things on canvas, say.
Yeah, I was, everything was so traditional, and it was sort of coming out of the post-conceptual 60s. So, and painting was dead, I was told by a lot of people. So, I decided to paint in a different way. I like primitive painting, and I started using, instead of brushes, I started using sticks and nails.
I brought some sticks, actually, to show. But those paintings that are on the set are made.
Well, yeah, these are the stirring sticks, actually, and a lot of times what I'll do is I'll take sticks like this and make the larger strokes, and then make, well, this one has a little cap on it. Make sort of like the larger strokes with this, and then take like these little nails, because I was doing a lot of construction then for a lot of different people, and pull the paint wet into wet.
And it shows in the painting that they're seeing now how the nails are being pulled. And you used.
Yeah, these are all these coffee cans that I would get from all my friends, and I ended up, these became really popular.
But what'd you do, just mix the paint and coffee cans?
Yeah, I just mixed the paint and coffee cans.
And then dump it?
And then pour it out. Yeah, they were just sort of like a little apothecary jar here, just mix the paint up. And I had a consistency of a milkshake, and then sort of pouring it out in either a circle or a square or a triangle. And then using the other sticks to sort of pull the colors wet into wet.
What other kinds of materials did you use?
Well, I started to, I work on flat canvas initially, and then I wanted the paintings to become more physical because I really was very interested in Frank Stella and the relief type painting he was doing. So I discovered this stuff called polyurethane foam, which,
and that's
yeah, it was just like this little critter down here, my buffalo that I just made in Yellowstone. And it was a way of taking the paintings and making them more theatrical, I guess is a good word.
But but instead of freestanding like the buffalo is, it was on the canvas.
Yeah, this is a good example. If you can imagine taking multiple shapes like this of different animals or plants or people. I was doing a lot of gang fight paintings, urban violence type thing, but in a funny kind of way. And superimposing these on top of one another and then creating like a dimensional kind of painting that had actually a sense of depth to them.
And then from that sense of depth, they came off the canvas.
Yeah, they came off the canvas, and I started, well, this material didn't really hold up in real space, so I did make a couple of pieces. There was one totem pole shape that I made, and I remember somebody purchased it, and the night before I was to take it over, it fell over in my studio and broke, so I hope they're not listening to this, but I had to put it together with hot glue or something, but they never knew the difference, and it worked out well. So I started moving into like marine plywood, cutout shapes, and then eventually into the aluminum.
And here's the aluminum on...
yeah, these are some small examples. This is my little earthquake house here, with all the people sort of running around the outside. There's a big crack in the middle. And this is a little calla lily shape, which is a shape that I've used a lot in a lot of my work. But the smaller ones are just the 1/4 inch, and then the larger ones that I've done outside for public art projects have been like as thick as 1 inch or 1.5 inch material.
So that's a totally different kind of material.
It's a different material, but then in a way, I'm still making sort of the similar kinds of marks, embellishing the surface with a lot of detail and sort of cross-hatching, which is sort of indicative of the paintings and the drawings, which there aren't really drawings here.
These pieces, of course, could be used outside.
Mm-hmm.
So you've started to incorporate those in your commission pieces.
Yeah, I've been fortunate enough to get some large commissions. The first one was with the state of California to do 100 animals out of brushed aluminum from California.
And that's in the Ronald Reagan State Building downtown.
Yeah,
And how long
yeah.
is it? It's like a 32,
It's 55 feet long.
55
Yeah,
feet long.
so-
And it's, how wide is it?
I'd say they're about, it's about 30 inches high, and they're about 10 inches off the wall. And the shapes are all sort of welded with spacers in between each other on top of one another.
And since that's in a state building, you used all the animals that were indigenous to the state of California?
Yeah, I thought it was real appropriate because it was more of what is a popular term called site-specific in a way, and it sort of worked in the space also, I thought. But I like animals, and I'm very much into the environmental aspect of that.
Is that how you've chosen your themes? Your animal themes or your...
Yeah, you know, I think that a lot of the stuff that I've done are animals that live in the area. I mean, recently I did a piece over on Crescent and Wilshire for Tresinda Corporation.
We have a picture of that. It's a...
Yeah, there's an outdoor piece, which is a deer family, because there are deer in Beverly Hills.
And then the
And then there's an obelisk on the inside of the building that's 23 feet high with a dove with an olive branch in his mouth, white dove. And that seemed appropriate for that space because the space is so monumental anyway. And this obelisk sits down on these granite floors that have concentric rings around them. And it's perfect for that space.
So how did commission work get started? How do you get into doing commissions?
Well, I think that people liked the work, but a lot of the paintings and some of the sculpture I was doing, but it didn't really fit the public art realm. Sort of things have to be indestructible. And that's when I started to move to metal. And I chose aluminum because it was the easiest metal to work with. And I had people that were interested in the work and sort of encouraged me to move in that direction, suggesting that maybe it would work in a more public kind of situation. So it was kind of a natural progression, I'd say, of going from taking the same ideas in the same kind of imagery in my paintings and then going into another medium, basically.
And then the public has to know that you can actually work in that material and that you can do something on a monumental...
Yeah, well, that's been the problem, is that when you start doing that, being known as a painter and a portrait artist and a printmaker, when you start doing something new, then you have to create these things so people can see it. So that's been one difficulty, is that they wanted to see it exist first, but then it's very expensive to make these things. So usually what I'll do is make a maquette a lot of time.
And a maquette...
Yeah, this would be similar to what these are here, a small version, and then they could see what it looks like, the material, and then if they have the imagination, they could realize it on a larger scale.
You told me you were doing some work in Japan, that the Far East is starting to open up.
Yeah, I was really, through the process of fly fishing, I met this friend of mine that is a designer in Japan, and he had a commission to do the artwork for the NTNT building, which is the Japanese telephone company. So he liked the relief paintings, which are similar to the buffalo down here, and I did an underwater painting with all kinds of different sea life, and a western painting with broncos and western animals, and then a jungle painting. And I thought it would be real appropriate because it's kind of an international approach to the relief painting. It's something that everybody can understand.
And when you do something like that for a foreign country, do you actually make the piece? Will you make the piece in Japan, or will you make it here and ship it, or how do you?
Yeah, I made it here. They were really interested in my work, and so they gave me sort of free rein on what I wanted to do. But I told them, well, I wanted to do these 3 themes because I thought it'd be very appropriate. So I made the pieces here.
In the exact size that
Yeah,
we're going to go in the building?
And they gave me the size, they showed me the blueprints, they told me how big they wanted. They told me how big they wanted it to be, but they didn't tell me how to paint them or what I had to do. So because they liked the sort of poetic license, if you may, for an artist to sort of do what they want to do.
Do those things come through your gallery, or do they come?
Well, a lot of times they come through meeting people in other states or other art consultants. I have a lot of sort of networking with people around the country now, And since I did get some public art pieces, I'm in catalogs that designers and architects can look up and see my name and see the kind of work that I've done. So it's been sort of an expanding kind of idea. Once you get on a list for a public art project, you start getting a lot of information in the mail.
Because people then know that they can depend on you and that you can
yeah, that
work
helps.
with.
I mean, you know, the biggest thing is that if people are going to spend a lot of money, they want to make sure they're going to get something that the artist is actually going to do it. And then the other thing too is that there are a lot of corporations that are very conservative, so they want something that's going to work and not be offensive to people. So the words that have been told to me time and time again, they want something contemporary yet conservative. So it's like, to me, it's like, well, that's a conflict of terms there. But the animals are conservative because everybody likes animals, and they it really sort of brings an awareness about the environment and their existence. And then the surface is developed in a way that has a very kind of abstract quality, very much like Michael Heiser or David Smith's sculpture.
And then we have to leave, but before we leave, just tell us quickly, would you go then and install the piece? Is that part of the...
Well, I wanted to, but the political climate and the recession in Japan has sort of disallowed the fact that we were not going to be able to do this. So maybe sometime in the future.
So that isn't part of your piece.
Well, I would like to have been. I would like to travel, but because I'd like to fish over there. But no, I didn't get to do it on this trip. But probably sometime in the future, I think we're going to go.
We're going to let you go so
Okay.
you can go fishing, because we know you love to fish.
Thanks.
Thanks, Joe Fay, for being with us. And thanks for being with us on Joan Quinn, etc. We'll see you next time.